Hello, I'm Remy Mraz, and thank you for joining Power Huddles, brought to you by Plugin South LA. Power Huddles are focused conversations founder to founder about the many facets of running a tech startup. And in this content series, we're delving into topics such as how to approach storytelling, raising capital, bringing on your first full-time employees, and a myriad of other components essential to starting, launching, and running a business. So our purpose here is to ensure that the community is receiving all of the knowledge and insights to build and scale a company, but also provide fellowship with founders who want to share what they've learned along the way in their journey. And so today I'm really excited that we're joined by Shawn Gunn, co-founder and CEO of PLLAY Labs. Shawn, thanks so much for taking time out to be with us today. Go ahead and share a little bit more about you and PLLAY Labs.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me. At a high level, PLLAY Labs is really focused on enabling services and monetization and technology in the interactive spaces. We've initially focused on bringing artificial intelligence technology into the gaming industry. For the direct purpose of monetizing player skill levels and passions for various types of games. Our initial kind of viewpoint and direction is around skill-based wagering. We saw a huge opportunity to create this directional behavior and monetization for about 2 to 3 billion users globally. And so emerging in a pretty big market already, the space of skill-based opportunities. And it gave us the opportunity also to bring in some other key comparable techniques around security, fraud protection, but the main goal is around skill-based wagering.
Yeah, huge industry. I'm actually mentoring another startup that's playing in the space, but on the facial recognition or kind of the security aspect and the cheating and all
biometrics.
Yeah, biometrics, no idea. And then I had no idea how big the gaming space was until I met a young founder. He was 19, already on his second startup in the e-gaming space. And phenomenal space. So kudos to you for finding this niche to capitalize on. A fun fact that I learned about Shawn is that he has had 6 exits, and that is incredible. So everybody make sure you have your pen, your paper, your fingers ready to take notes, because I know Shawn's going to just be dropping mad gems for us, all this wisdom that he's going to leave with us. And so let's get started. What is the right time for folks to start thinking about raising capital?
Well, yes, and I think the raising capital is a trap door, right? Because it can be that can happen in a lot of different ways, and I think we all fall into the passion and allure of venture funding, right? But there's many options before you get there, or many options even aside from venture funding. I think my personal view is, just from trial and error, is that you should think about how you're going to fund an idea or a company as you're starting it. Like knowing how you're going to take this kind of idea through infancy and child rearing and through the whole various phases is important, because at each step requires different types of funding, and knowing that a lot of times what I found is it takes maybe a little more time than you thought to get the revenue. If that's your goal. Sometimes some ideas don't call for revenue. You can have an idea that you can quickly flip into an acquisition or IP and license it out. So it just depends on what the goals are. But I do think that starting as early as possible is the key. And then once you have an understanding of what the baby you're birthing is going to be, then that can kind of give you directional behavior. Do I talk to angels at that early stage? Do I wait till I have an MVP to really start to go out to market category leaders, strategic players that are in the space? Or is this an idea that maybe I can take into the crowdfunding space? And so I've done a myriad of all those in and been kind of successful with each direction, but have learned it really depends on the product, which weapon you choose to execute. But as early as you can kind of start to resolve that plan, the better.
Right. And I think what I've seen and also heard is that it's really determining, what type of business you want to build and how long do you want to be in your business. So
Right.
if it's just something where you want to be in it for 20 years and, you want to grow it yourself, maybe the venture piece isn't your route. That is not the route to go, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
And if you need growth capital, maybe it's going the route of alternative based lending or, the more traditional route of lending. One of the things that I've observed about founders is a lot of them have their great ideas, right? They're visionary, and they can tell a great story around the product, right? And maybe the company itself, but a missing element is being able to tell a great financial story for the investors. Tell us how important that is and what are some good things that they should be telling in that piece.
Yes, fair point, because we all aren't good at everything, right? And I think that's the first part of being a good business person, is knowing what your strengths are and your weaknesses. That's where I see the greats are good at. And then you can surround yourself with people that can be pros at some of those other angles. So you're right. A lot of entrepreneurs are really good at the thing they're building or have built, but can't tell the key KPI story or financial narrative around that, or talk to other rooms aside from the ideation kind of track. And so one is, and I kind of evangelize this to young entrepreneurs, figure out your strengths and your weaknesses, and then put a really good early advisory team around you that is made up of, folks that have, been successful at exiting businesses or building businesses, maybe are in the strategic industry that you think your product or service will sell into or have some M&A into. And then lastly, people that can maybe support your weakness of the financial story. So, a lot of times early in my career, I'd have CFOs, just in my ethos, right? Maybe not direct advisors, but people I could bounce business models off of against and financial projections, because I was still learning, what was the right narrative and structure to put around that. And to I think your point in leading in the question is that sometimes is more important than the, fluffy, growth story, right? Because when someone's really interested in your business, they want to know how it's going to make money or what the capital requirements are going to be as you get to certain junctures and growth. And so having people in your network that can help you build on that story, or inverse on the other side, right? I know people that are good at the numbers and good at execution, but can't really tell the big story, and sometimes that can hurt you. So either way, you have to have mentors and a village around you that will help kind of bolster that side of the equation. If it's a good business, it's just a matter of finding the people that kind of believe in you and believe in what you're building. And folks are generally want to help, right? You can look at incubators and other things as a formalized structure, but I've done well on LinkedIn, right? Just reaching out to people at different parts of my career or junction to say, man, I really don't understand this part, or I need a little support here. And you can find people within, a few clicks.
Right. Tapping into that first, second, third connections.
Degree of connections. Exactly. Yep.
And what I like to say is soar with your strengths and hire or surround yourself with those that are stronger than you in those other areas, right? So,
well, you have to start with this whole thing starts any level of success with having confidence in yourself, right? We could all beat ourselves up about the things we don't have or don't know. But people want to help other people that feel passionate and confident about what they're building. Doesn't matter how early in the process you are. Most times they're buying you. And it's like, I don't know if this thing Shawn's building is going to really work out, but man, I really liked his passion. His passion about it made me think he'll figure it out. And I think, to your point, lead with that. And the rest magically starts to happen when you're trying to connect the dots and people see you're working hard and you're smart. The rest of it will take care of itself in the process.
Absolutely. And I'll give you a story to personify that.
Yeah.
When with my first venture, my the former CFO of a tech company that I worked at
Hmm.
saw me sharing on Facebook and doing these Facebook Live videos about what we were building. And he reached out and said, Remy, I love your passion in what you're doing. I want to lend my services to you
Right.
free of charge.
Yep.
As a fractional CFO, have you put your financial models together? Have you put your projections together? I can do that for you.
It's a great concept that's hard to explain to people like you who haven't lived it. Is that I tell folks all the time, I wake up every day, and ever since I've been an entrepreneur, and there's 50 things I have no answer to, right? I don't know how these 50 things are going to happen, and they're important to like the next 50 things I want to do, but I know the answer to maybe these 10. And magically every day when you get up and what I call you chop wood, all of a sudden out of the blue, somebody in my network go, hey, I got this guy and he knows how to do these 4 things, or he can connect you. And so I tell people, you got to just get up and keep believing and be passionate, and that, whatever you believe in, the universe will take care of matching you. But it's a timing thing. It's a relationship thing. You can't be afraid to put yourself out there like you on Facebook Live. That takes a lot of guts, right? And a lot of confidence, but it's still scary stuff, right? Because that magic, intranet is can be an ugly place sometimes. It can be a wonderful place too. But I think you have to, in these businesses, be willing to expose yourself, but lead with confidence. Don't worry about the things you don't know yet.
Exactly. And you're right, it is magical. And what I found is a lot of folks, there's one part of it, the fear of putting yourself out there or asking for help because you like, oh, I'm perceived as weak, or I don't know, and I should be knowing. Or it's the other piece of being afraid to share if someone's going to steal my idea.
Yeah.
Right. And the reality is people have so much going on. They don't have time to be stealing your idea.
Yeah. I was lucky enough early in my career. I was corporate America and did well there, but I competed. I was at Nokia, and I competed with Google and Apple as it was rising. They were rising to be what they are today. And every day it was like, oh, you have this, and Google can do that, right? Every business, and you quickly learned that yes, everyone could probably clone or steal your idea. Magical and successful ideas aren't mixed in that. They're mixed in execution and passion, right? So you can steal anyone's idea, but it's not your idea, right? You don't have the same passion that you have that I would have if I tried to steal your idea. So I'm better off working with you, right? In some fashion, if I really want to win. So yes, it could happen. I tell people all the time, you can't worry about those things. That's something that lives in, and if you're doing what you're doing, you have some advantage and a moat, then chances are something good's going to happen, right? We never know how good it's going to be, but something good will happen. Yeah.
Yeah. I woke up one morning, this was several years back, and literally opened my eyes and I said, God, how are we going to get this trademark work done? I said,
I've been there.
Can you show me a way? I literally just, can you show me a way? And 2 hours later, I shared an Uber with a woman who actually turned out to be an entrepreneur as well, and woman of color. And so we really bonded in a 12-minute ride, 12-minute ride. And so we're just swapping stories. And I said, and I don't even know why I did it, but like it literally just came
something made you just say it. Yeah.
I said, my biggest challenge right now is I need to get some trademark work taken care of, but I don't have the cash to do it. And she goes, oh, maybe my firm can help you. And I go, what do you mean? And she goes, oh, I haven't quit my day job yet. She said, I'm a junior lawyer at such and such firm in town. And we do pro bono work. Wow. The woman I want to mentor me is a woman of color. But I need to find a case for us to work on together. Maybe this can be it. She said, send me your pitch deck. 2 days later, she called me up. She said, they're going to do it. Like $10,000 worth of work. Boom, done. And so that's what you're talking about, magic.
Yes, right? And the magic.
To believe that that stuff starts happening. And it is just about being open, about sharing and believing and sharing your passion. People want to help when people are passionate.
Yeah, you hit on something too, just on that point, just to put it, is like the whole idea, like you have to have a good ego, right? Because that's tied to your confidence and things like that. But you can't have the bad ego, which is telling you not to share, not to talk, not to expose yourself. And this business does work in the inverse as an entrepreneur, where you have to engage with sometimes people you don't know, in a way that can be pretty scary. But that's really where the hidden jewels comes from. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's important.
Yeah, and so bringing up the fact of engaging with people that you may be scared of, investors, right? So reaching out to investors, getting to know them. What do you recommend in terms of like, is it cold calling or warm intros? What's your suggestion? What's worked for you?
Yeah, so it helped me. I had a bit of an unfair advantage because I am an investor and had invested a little bit. So I kind of knew how I wanted to be talked to or pitched or things like that. And I don't care what anyone says, it always feels better when it's a little warmer, right? When it's, you say, hey, I got this great entrepreneur and can I introduce you to? That always feels better than the cold call off of LinkedIn or email. It just doesn't say it's impossible. And so with that said, I came up with sometimes in my trajectory, the VCs weren't advantageous for me. And, maybe at certain points I didn't have the biggest network. And I've learned from that and talked more, right, over the last 10 plus years or whatever. But I think there's a hierarchy to investor networks, right? It doesn't matter how wealthy that investor or investor group is, you can always triangulate it. And I believe you can see it on platforms like LinkedIn, right? And the key and the magic is connecting with maybe not the people that are the investor, or sometimes it's hard to break through, but you can quickly figure out who's connected, who's that person's CPA, who's their lawyer, who's in the law firm, who's, other investors that are in their network, who's worked with them at certain companies. Maybe there's a shared mutual connection with their networks. And same thing holds true for professional athletes, right? So been fortunate enough to have some of them on my cap table, and they're the notoriously hardest, right, to knock on the door. But sometimes you can get to someone, their ethos, their agent, their lawyer, and so figure out that recipe. And for each person, it's a little bit different. But I think the beauty about the last, I'm going to say 5 years, maybe 3, is that 5 years or older, if I went to Celebrity A's lawyer and said, hey, I got this great idea in gaming, haven't heard of you, I'm not ruining my reputation to take it to, A-list celebrity. Now there's been so many stories of A-list celebrity missing out on the next Uber or the next this, that the word is out. There is no deal that is too small, because every investor, celebrity, athlete wants to be in most cases, early as possible, or as early as makes sense. So now it is green field, right? I mean, you could tap into, LeBron's gardener, probably. He'll knock on the fence, right? Because everybody gets it, right? Even the mom and pop, right? My mother understands, like, there's this thing, startup investing, that's important. I don't understand it, but people are making a lot of money, right? And so seriously, she's at like lunches at, links meetings with ladies like, my son's raising capital, and can you tell your son who's at Activision, right? That stuff's happening. And so I think it's just drawing these webs of, how do I get to this investor? Of course, classic recipe, you still got to do your homework, right? You still got to figure out who's investing in your space, what rounds or time periods are they investing in, who's the early stage, who's the growth, and then build your map. And I'm telling you, it's on LinkedIn. You got to do some work, but I've closed deals, I've raised millions of dollars, I've done a lot of that. Now, you still got to go do your handshakes, your meetings, your Zooms, the calls don't go away, but the initial prospecting, you can do that from your computer, at home. And I think it's understanding that each person's network has a hierarchy of stakeholders, people that person trusts. Some people they trust more than others, right? My best friend, I might trust more than, my lawyer, but I'm probably going to take calls that either one set up for me or emails. And so I think it's just that understanding. You just want to get into the right room or Zoom to stake your case and go from there. So I think that is what I always argue to, young entrepreneurs is go that route, because there's a couple of things in your favor when you pull that off. One, you generally can get better terms on those early stages from, I would say investors that are partly happy to be in deals early and also want to make money, right? So those two things are meeting. And so you have a little bit probably more leeway on the KPI kind of overlay of hitting certain numbers while you're growing. And then the beauty of today is now with so much publicity and social media that you can create for your business, picking the right early stage investors can drive you into institutional money if that's the path you go down, right? So it all can kind of build on itself. But I would generally tell people to look at that path.
Yeah, that's great advice. I know one of the best contacts relationships I made was actually an analyst who worked at a VC firm, because guess what? They're the ones that are getting the decks and they're having them go through it and say, is this a company
This is good or not? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so meeting him was excellent, because what he did was he took my deck and he came back and he literally did a risk management profile for me.
Wow.
And pointed out the areas of my deck that were weak and that I needed to, tell the story better there, right?
Yeah. Plus, he's probably seeing a lot of your competitors in some cases, so he can kind of see what's resonating and what's not resonating with others, like investors or whatever. Yep.
Right. So yeah, work the tentacles, right, so to speak, of the investor.
And I'll throw one more thing in there. If we kind of encapsulate it to early stage, aside from what I brought up, is there's also, depending on the deal, the path of crowdfunding too now, right? In many cases, you can crowdfund a really good idea without even having an MVP or alpha built of a product, right? It can be slideware. And so, and that's just getting better and better and better, right? The amount of capital you can raise, the amount of services out there. So I've seen some success and have other fellow entrepreneurs, men and women, that are killing it, right, with the amount of money they're raising, and they've done it through several rounds of early stage funding. So there actually is really no reason you can't get capital. I'm not saying it's super easy, but there's a lot more at our fingertips to get the ball rolling and then get to those upper levels if you so need it.
Yeah, it's a completely different ball game. With my previous venture, we had started it 5 years ago. Crowdfunding was really just coming about. It's maybe a few years in. Now we are getting into the unaccredited. We did one of the first unaccredited, launches. Now there's so much there, and there's so much more for Black and Brown founders. We still have a long way to go, but I'm on a bunch of email lists and I'm seeing things come through on the daily now, grants, other loans, funds, whatever the case may be. So it's just about doing your homework and getting out there and researching and getting your name on lists so that you can get that information and take advantage of it. So
totally agree.
Yeah, when it comes to, you're reaching out, you're building these relationships, and there's so much to do and so many people out there. Have you come across any good tools to, keep track of your relationships, or, just how you like the process, right? Or is it just a good old spreadsheet?
I was just saying, I've been pitched on a whole bunch of them and services, and nothing yet has beat my old spreadsheet. Yeah, I keep well, really in that regard, two spreadsheets. One is prospects of investors, and I keep pretty copious notes because, as you know, out of 100 investors you talk to, like 95 of them aren't interested or the right fit, or 99. We've invested in a competitor or whatever it is, 99, right? And so, but what I found is they can become valuable in later rounds. They can become valuable to your network, right? Because many times that investor might not have been the right fit for me, but then a buddy of mine will call and I'm like, hey man, I talked to such and such a firm or angel yesterday, might be a great fit. And people have done it for me. And so you touched on this before, but I think what's going to all get these ships to float for us as men and women of color is the village effect, right? Because your success is my success, right? We need more of us that look like us to win globally. But then you can even break it down, geography. Like we need wins holistically in Los Angeles, right?
Here in our neighborhood.
Yeah, of all types. We really need it for us, but we really need a lot of tech. And so, and I have a lot of people that help me, and I try to help as many as I can because that's what's important. So yeah, good old spreadsheets still haven't trumped it for me, and maybe it's just the way my brain works. I need to see things a certain way, and then obviously I keep spreadsheets on just deal activity. So yeah, I'm still a spreadsheet person. Maybe I'm just a old dinosaur.
I'm right there with you. So
yeah.
When it comes to investors, there's two types of investors. I mean, probably more than that, but in respect to like tech startups, it's usually angel investors and VCs. So for the entrepreneurs that just starting out, new to the game, I think a lot of people hear VC and think that that's the route you should be going. But tell us the difference between the angel and the VC.
Yeah, so in the angel space is opening up, as we just touched on, right? There used to just be hardcore, you had to be accredited. And so now there's paths, and accredited meaning, in essence, high net worth, certain level of liquid assets in order for you to be able to invest in early stage companies. Now with things like crowdfunding and other kind of vehicles, you can pool investors that aren't accredited and raise capital at much lower dollar sizes and kind of bundle them together. And as I mentioned, there's structures like safe notes and convertible notes, and you can sell, shares, just full equity into your company, whatever kind of fits your company use case, through direct relationships and through these different platforms, like a startup engine or things like that. And so that world is for the individual investor to usually come in that very early stage to get the first bit of cash outside of the founders into a company and get the ball rolling. There are early stage VCs. There's now probably every round of VC per se. What I would say is angels generally have a lot more tolerance, and in most cases are investing on a longer time horizon. And want to be rightfully rewarded for the risks that they're taking, for taking a flyer with you, right? And as I mentioned at the top, generally, as great as your idea is, they're investing in the people, right, or the leadership, because any investor that's done that a few times quickly realizes that there generally is some pivots going down as you go down the path. And what I'm trying to figure out as an investor is like, are you able to make the right calls, more right than wrong, to figure out what this baby should be to be successful? And so that's how I see the role in the landscape of the angel investor. And then, VCs are there in a very similar fashion, but because they're general institutions or professional investors, there is a much higher bar that generally has to be met for, what the business is, where the business is going, what runway and track record and key deliverables that business is going to have to live up to. Not saying you don't do that with your investors, but it's a much more scrutinized effect with VCs. And every business is not ready to be a venture-backed business when it starts. And some businesses don't meet that requirement ever. And they're still successful businesses. I was talking to a friend of mine who vets a lot of those businesses, and he said, I have this discussion every day with entrepreneurs that, people were doing really good, 50 years ago when they weren't locked into this VC thing. They were building solid businesses. Mm-hmm. And I think we've fallen in love with the allure of the unicorn. And every business isn't a unicorn, but there's people still walking away with, 30 million, 50 million, whatever the number is, right? And that's hard, right? Because we're all under the social media effect of VC, and big exits. And so I think that's something we have to recalibrate as entrepreneurs of just what is a meaningful, successful outcome of this business? And what is my time horizon, as you so laid out? And that can also determine, what path I go down to fund this business, because some businesses may take a little longer to get off the ground, but you can get the revenue going and never have to take any outside funding and own all the business, right? Never sell any of it.
Exactly.
And so there's nothing wrong with owning 100 of something and doing well, right? So that's a recalibration I think all of us have to individually make, and then figure out what's the best way to fund it. But if your business is in the realm of venture and it's high growth and in cutting edge, high growth marketplaces, and you have a really good competitive advantage and can scale quickly, there is networks of VCs that will hand you money at the right time. And connecting with me or you or other people on LinkedIn can get you to the right folks depending on your industry.
Yeah, and to put a point in that, I know a founder recently who didn't take any venture capital until way later in the game, right?
Smart.
And he's actually exiting now, coming out of it with 80 million liquid.
Oh, yeah. Because the longer you can wait, the more value you can build and the more you own. Yeah. So
right. And you can leverage, you have the leverage when you can do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So a recent question that came up with another founder I was talking to, who said she was talking to investors, and this one particular investor wanted 49% of her company. Right?
That's a big percentage.
That's a huge percentage, right? And given where she is at, she's really early stage. I can see why he's asking, because there's a lot of risk piece to it, right? But her question was, what are red flags with investors? What are things that founders should be looking at? Because I think a lot of people get enamored by and may not be savvy enough to know, right? And get excited about, oh, someone wants to invest in me. Okay, let me do it. Right.
And I've heard those horror stories, and I think not knowing any of the details of that, some of the things I've seen that drive investors to those lofty asks, sometimes they don't feel like the expertise that's needed to get the business kind of over the next 3 to 4 phases or whatever it's going to be exists on the team, and they feel like the risk is much higher, and maybe may call for that investor to have participation in growing the business, hypothetically, right, without knowing things. And so some of the questions that a founder should ask is why they're asking for that amount, right? When the kind of normal early stage percentages range from 1% to, let's say on the high end, 30%, maybe 20%. And so I think a founder has to ask why, because you need to start to vacillate. If I'm hearing this in a few kind of situations, is it a thing I need to fix? Do I need to bring other talent on this team? Is the product not far enough in its building or development process? Or am I just dealing with kind of shady investors, right? People that are just trying to take more of the value than really they should be owed, or just asking for a lot. So it is a probing piece of the puzzle. And I think you answer some of those questions before the investor meeting by having really good advisors, people that have invested or are investing in businesses, or maybe investing in you, have sold businesses. They should be telling you before you get to your investor meeting, you're not ready, right? Or like your deck's not ready, or your story needs work, or this product still needs to get a little further. So let's figure out a way to kind of get the development effort going on a shoestring budget, so you can have a really solid MVP. Because sometimes those bad investor conversations happen when you come in unprepared. And so an investor can say, I like the idea, kind of like the founder, but it has a lot of other things that need to be built upon. So, yeah. Right.
And let's say when you're building these relationships with investors, right? Is it, and then, time goes by, you're ready to ask or re-engage, what's the best way to do that? Or is it that you should be keeping them abreast, on a regular basis of your traction or your growth or?
Yeah, everyone doesn't tell you the full truth, but I try to resolve down to, are you not investing because of what? And, there's a competitive issue, you're already in a business, don't want to do that. That kind of takes you out the game for a while with that investor, but you might be able to kind of come back in later stages. If it's like, hey, really like the business, want to see it get to this stage, I like to kind of get them committed to a really strong KPI. Like, hey, if you get 3 people on this platform, I'm in, right? If you kind of finish the V1 of the product, I'm in. If you get your first strategic partner. And so then you can actually, on that good old spreadsheet, say, hey, I'm going to call Bob back when we signed, our first deal, and know that Bob is good for $1 million to $3 million, because Bob's told me that's what his range is. He kind of does that all day. Then you can start to build a really solid pipeline, because what's going to happen is until you start getting traction on investors, you need to figure out, what do I need to do to get my first set of cash in this business, from outside funding sources. And you don't want that to be by gut, right? You want that to be kind of almost analytical, that I know if I do these 3 things, I have a good shot at getting money out of these 10 people. And then you can start to triangulate odds, and probably all the stuff we do starts to feel like a casino, but it's like, oh yeah, I can get 70% of this 30%, all that good stuff. So I think that's key in understanding and how to deal with prospective investors, is you want to try to box them in as much as you can, and not just take a generic no, but tell me why there's a no, and is it a no or a maybe, and what's the maybe circumstances look like.
Right. And speaking of team, and we talked about, people on your team maybe having different expertise. When going into pitch, when you've done it, right? Or is it
doing it, done it? Yeah.
Right. Doing it now, what is it? You telling the story, the whole story? Is it a team effort? How do you decide who's handling what?
It's situational for me. There are situations where I would say this: I generally like to be front man on setting the narrative and telling the story. And that's right for my situation, doesn't mean that's right for every situation. I think when you have highly technical products or solutions, call it a SaaS business, right? And you're plugging into an enterprise. When I've had those businesses, I used to have my CTO or lead engineer run shotgun with me, because the nature of the business called for that person, he or she, to be intimate in setting the tone of what our advantage was. And it also validated a lot of things. In many tech businesses, I think the leadership, whoever CEO or however you want to cut it, should be telling the first line of storytelling and narrative setting. And then those subsequent meetings that start to splinter off to answering questions, then you need to kind of bring those key team members in. One, it's a good time to kind of connect the dots, but also let the expertise of that specialist start to put his or her voice on that part of the business, and kind of ideate around that. So that's just my view. Plus, I find it easier generally when you're pitching to investors or strategic partners. They're already coming on with 5 and 6 people, right? It's just the nature of corporate America and organizations. And I don't like to have 5 or 6 people. I like to have 1 or 2, because it's easier to get your energy and your story and your information and set that right tone. Because you have to remember, a lot of what I tell people that aren't familiar with this, is like, you're telling a story, right? Some of the story is built and real, and some of the story is a sci-fi fiction, right? This is the things we're going to do, or here's our roadmap. But it's important to be able to tell a cohesive story so people understand it. Obviously, it's believable and they trust that you can execute it. But also, it's just like buying a house. People have to feel like, I can see myself living here, right? So it's like an investor, I can see myself being a part of this. I can see my money being a part of this. Most investors just don't want to make money. It's a novelty and a voyeuristic thing. They want to be able to tell people, hey, I invested in this awesome AI company by this great young lady out of Dallas, right? And that's the storyline. So they're judging all these things when they're listening to your pitch, right? And so that's why it has to me, the narrative needs to be set succinctly.
And with that said, what are some types of questions that, founders should be prepared to, and I know it's going to depend on the business, but what are just some standard questions that founders should be prepared for in those investor meetings?
Yeah, so what I find is when you have the investors that are not general tech investors, right, high net worth, you have to walk them through the instrument that you're presenting to them for investing. So let's say it's a convertible note or a safe note. Many are not as knowledgeable about those things. And so you have to find a quick analogy. So I have a lot of real estate investors that invest in some of my businesses. They understand convertible debt and convertible notes. So it's easy to kind of draw that conclusion or to them and they go, oh, got it. It's a synergy. It's just, I don't get a interest rate, right? But things like that. So I think one, understanding the instrument you're presenting as intimately as possible, because you, in many cases, will have to get them comfortable with that. Two, many will ask you kind of what are the investment needs of this business? And this could be angel investing. They want to know, how many rounds do you think I'm going to be in this business? What's the follow-on time frame? What do you think the valuations are going to be at each round? Like, where are you targeting? And I think you as a entrepreneur have to know there's wiggle room in there, but they're trying to see if you've thought deeply about this business, or have you stopped at tomorrow, right? Because that's another red flag for an investor. And that's where, once again, your village of advisors and network of experts won't let you not think about those things if you have the right people around you, because they're going to be asking you the same thing. And then I think, fortunately or unfortunately, as an entrepreneur, you have to be a jack of all trades. So I'm not saying, if you're a non-technical entrepreneur that you're actually coding, but you need to be able to speak the language enough that when you are talking to an investor who actually may be technical, that you come off believable and that they feel confident that you understand this enough to know that someone put the right roof on your house, right? That your developers are really executing what you're telling us is going to happen. And then lastly, I think you have to be ready to understand how you're going to grow the business, right? Is this B2C and everything's ad supported and paid and social media, or is there a strategic kind of ecosystem play? And you're going to go build partnerships, because what's going to come out of that is, well, how are you going to do that, right? Are you going to do the partnerships? Do you have people on your team that are going to do that? Did you come from a company in the industry you're working in where you have all these great relationships and that can happen faster? So I think those are a lot of the questions that a really good investor would ask. And I think the last one, which you're always going to get, is what are you building this to? Is this an IPO? Are you open to acquisition? What's the exit plan here? Or what are the exit plans? And so many cases, even at early stage, I've been asked to provide a document, which is general practice for me. Like, even if you're ideating and don't have a lot of data points, you need to kind of lay out, that infographic of, here's the verticals I think our partnerships can come from. Here's the players, top 5 players in each. Oh, by the way, not only could they be M&A, but they could be strategic partners for us along the way, right? Because the best M&A happens as partnerships, and they get a chance to grow with you, and then they buy you, right?
Right. Yeah, there's something that I was given through a female founders network was a due diligence sheet.
Yes.
Right. And we did some mock investments in, pitches, and then mock investments and how we would approach it. And so you can Google and find some online if you want to reach out. I can provide one, but having that checklist, so you're really looking at it from the lens of the investor. Absolutely. What they're looking for. And the key is to de-risk the investment. Right.
And make it easier. Yeah.
Easier. Easier.
And you're right, because a lot of things I just talked about, if you build the data room as part of your initial kind of just, I'm building this business, and that'll iterate, and you'll change things and you'll add and subtract things. But the top 10 things on that due diligence list will be there, right? Your financial projections, your kind of M&A targets, all those things will be in there. Obviously, your formation documents, all the cap table. Those things will be most of the questions that an investor will ask. And obviously, as you get further along in the trajectory of your company, well, now you have revenue and more financial, reporting. So that's all in there too. But early stage, that due diligence list would be great. I agree with you.
Yeah, and I heard some advice the other day on a webinar I was sitting on with some other startups that are way further down the road, but they were saying, having your financial infrastructure, the financial organization, like good financial hygiene, corporate hygiene is so critical from day one, because if an investor pops up or some, a PE firm's reaching out and wants to acquire your company, you just want to have everything in order and have that, your data room, intact.
Totally agree. Yep, totally agree.
Shawn, thank you so much for all of this valuable information. Are there any words of wisdom that you'd like to leave upon us before we end?
It's really simple for me. You got to believe in yourself.
100%.
Believe in yourself. And that seems so easy, right? But I know being an entrepreneur, especially entrepreneur of color, there's days where it's a little tough, right? And so I found when you get to those moments of acquisition or exit, whatever it is, you'll look back on all these moments where it was really easy for you to quit. And it's simple as just saying, I believe in what I'm doing. I believe what I'm triangulating to do. And I believe the universe is going to help me connect the dots. Believe in yourself.
That is it. Believe and take action. That's my
thing.
You've got to take actions. And on some days, I mean, look, we both know this, right?
It's hard.
It is really hard. And I like to say the inner critic is in your ear and saying, you can't do it. The imposter syndrome is flaring up, et cetera, et cetera. And you just have to remember your why. And if you can only do one thing in the day, if that's all you have the energy for is to do one thing, just take action every day. And like Shawn is saying, the universe absolutely 100% will conspire for your greatness.
Totally agree. Totally agree. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.